Okay, everybody, so we're going to revise the diet and nutrition aspect of GCSE PE. So the main four areas you're going to really be focused on is questions on macronutrients, questions on micronutrients, hydration and hydration strategies, and then other nutritional strategies such as protein timing and carbohydrate loading. So they're the main four aspects that you'll be facing in the paper. So get your pens, papers ready, hit pause if you need to grab that, and we're going to go through these four areas. So it should be maybe 4 cue cards. Starting off with, we're going to talk about the definition of what a balanced diet is. Exam questions might just say, well, what is the definition of a balanced diet? It might be a multiple choice question. So just having a good understanding of this definition is really important. And it's a good starting point for revision anyway. So balanced diet is where you have a combination of your macronutrients, micronutrients, fiber and water. That's one essentially definition of it. Or you could just talk about the optimal ratio of nutrients in the balanced diet. So having a good balanced diet helps us function more efficiently. It helps us reduce health issues. It can also make sure we've got a good energy balance, which is going to help us maintain optimum body weight, and that's important for sporting activities. So the next bit you need just to remember is what are the macronutrients and what are the micronutrients, what their basic roles are in the body. So macronutrients are fats and carbohydrates, and whenever you're talking about them, you want to be mentioning the word energy. So fats and carbohydrates are for energy, and whenever you're talking about proteins, you always want to try and get the phrase growth and repair in your answer. Vitamins and minerals are essentially there for help maintaining body health, and we'll go in a little bit more detail when we talk about the micronutrients in detail. You also need to know the role of water, which is obviously to prevent dehydration, and then fiber, which will help your digestive system. So let's get into the big areas. So macronutrients, it's often asked quite a bit in the exam questions, and the way I've broken it down is into the 3 macronutrients and their roles and what they are doing in the body. So starting off with fats. Fats and carbohydrates, whenever you're talking about both of them, you're going to need to put in the word they used for energy. The difference between fats is that it's a slow release of energy, whereas carbohydrates is a quicker release of energy. So both are used for energy, just the speed at which the energy is released. So if you're doing something that's under low intensity, that might be more of an endurance event, then fats will be a better source of fuel for the athlete. So fats is a slow release of energy, and therefore would be the primary source for events that last a longer duration. Whereas carbohydrates are essentially a quicker release of energy and tend to be used in more high intensity activities and such as games, players and power and speed based activities. So make sure you've got an example of a sporting performer or event that would use carbohydrates. One of the key things you might want to talk about in your answer, if you're asked about what's the role of carbohydrates, is that it helps to recover, or taking on more carbohydrates help to recover glycogen stores. And essentially, glycogen is the stored form of glucose in the muscles and the liver. So just try to get some of these key points in your answer. And then when we're talking about proteins, again, we can use that term growth and repair. They're used to help grow and repair tissues of the body, but essentially most common it's used to grow and repair muscle, but all tissues require protein. Protein, once it's digested, it gets broken down into a thing called amino acids, which are the building blocks of what our muscle is. And then when it reaches the muscle site, it then helps muscle growth, which is hypertrophy. So remember that term, hypertrophy, which is the idea that muscles are getting bigger, the muscle fibers are getting bigger. And why do we need bigger muscles? Well, it gives us more strength and it gives us more power. So you need to apply that into the sport. So if you look over this point here, the impact on performance, when we're talking about protein, if we're trying to get bigger muscles, it means we can throw the object further. So throw the discus further, throw the javelin further, or run faster. 100-meter sprinter outrunning their opponents. Could be someone jumping higher. So why we need bigger muscles is to create that power and strength in those movements, whereas the fats and the carbohydrates, always just try to think of this sort of example: maintain your pace for longer, resist fatigue, run harder for longer. So try always to have what the macronutrient is, how it works in the body, and then an application of it, your example of it. So just try to remember those sort of 3 parts of it, and you'll be able to score reasonably good marks on each of those areas. Okay, so micronutrients tend to be broken into vitamins and minerals, and we need to know what the role of the vitamins are and what the role of the minerals are. So the role of vitamins is to maintain our health and help us reduce illness, and the role of minerals is to allow our body systems to function properly and the body processes to work properly. So I would suggest that you pick at least 2 vitamins that you know inside out and 2 minerals that you know inside out. There are more, but these are the 4 that I've sort of referred to and how we apply them to sport. So the first is vitamin C, which is fairly easy to remember, often found in citrus fruits, etc. And the first thing, as you probably all know, is that vitamin C fights infection and it helps bolster our immune system. So that's what the example of the vitamin, what it actually does, and then how can that help us for performance? Well, if we're not ill, if we're preventing illness, it means we can continue to train. It might be that you could use it in terms of recovery and therefore get back onto training more quickly. Vitamin D is something that helps us absorb calcium, and calcium is important for our bones. So if we're able to absorb calcium, then we can increase our bone strength, and then the application of that is that we can prevent injuries. So we're able to train longer and harder without the risk of injuries. If we go over to the minerals and start looking at the 2, I would suggest calcium is a good starting point. Calcium improves bone density, and on an offshoot, remember the type of training that you would do that improves bone density is load bearing or weight bearing exercises such as jogging. So calcium is used to increase our bone density, and again that makes us as a sports performer less likely to suffer injury. It means we can train harder without the risk of injury. And then iron, as you probably all remember, is that it's involved in increasing our hemoglobin in the red blood cells. Hemoglobin is what carries the oxygen inside our blood cells, and then that blood is then taken to our working muscles, and the oxygen is used to give us energy to maintain the performance in whatever game we're playing. And if you're thinking about energy, you could be talking about a tennis match. Play the entire match without fatigue is an example. So try to think about how you could apply that. So generally think iron is for oxygen storage in our blood, gives us energy, and energy helps us play for longer without the risk of fatiguing. Okay, so we've done the macronutrients and micronutrients, so we're going to look at nutritional strategies, and the first is protein timing. This is one that might catch people out, but it is very, very simple. So we've seen the word protein. We know the word, the phrase we need to get in our answers whenever we see the word protein is growth and repair. So just make sure you put something in your answer that says growth and repair of muscle fibers or growth and repair of body cells. That's why we're taking it. Now, in terms of the timing, you really want to take it straight after exercise. Well, that's what the exam boards say. There's essentially a window called the anabolic window, and the exam boards say we should be taking it straight after exercise. Science will argue that, but for the sake of the exam, just write that down. why we take it. So we said, right, we take protein for growth and repair. We're going to take it straight after exercise, and we're going to use things like shakes and bars to make it easier. Protein shakes, protein bars to make it easier to take that protein in. Once we've taken the protein in, there are a couple of reasons why. So it helps us recover from training, allows us to recover more quickly and gets back into training quicker. It also creates the process of protein synthesis in our body, which allows us to build more muscle, and building more muscle is called hypertrophy. So try to get those sort of 4 points, 3 or 4 points into your answer. But remember, we see the word protein, growth and repair. The timing of it, straight after exercise. You got 2 marks there, quite straightforward. And then one of the other points in your answer will just pick you up that 3rd mark. The next strategy we're going to look at is carbohydrate loading, which is basically used for endurance events such as marathon runners. Now, that often comes up just as a multiple choice question: which type of athlete would use carbohydrate loading? Or what is the benefit of carbohydrate loading? So the benefit of carbohydrate loading is to increase our energy stores. So these are 2 typical multiple choice exam questions, 1 markers. But if we had to write a little bit more detail on it, we've got a lot on the screen that we can use to structure our answer. So the first thing, you would talk about who would use it. The marathon runner, the endurance runner, the long distance cyclist, someone who is performing for a longer duration of time. And straight away you can put in there why that person would use it. So they would use it so they can run or maintain their pace for longer and therefore get a quicker time. So you're saying who's using it and how it's going to impact their performance. So you can link those 2 points in straight away. 1 mark, 2 marks. Then you can get into the nitty-gritty of what the processes of carbohydrate loading is. So we start off with, and this is very summarized, we start off with low carbohydrates and high intensity of exercise about a week before the event that we're preparing for. So if it's a marathon, the week before the marathon, you would increase your intensity of training, but you would reduce the amount of carbohydrates your body is taking in. This essentially will trick your body into thinking there'll be a lack of carbohydrates coming, and when the carbohydrates do come in, your body will snatch all them up and keep them in the muscles stored for energy. So the way we do it is we taper our training. Taper the training means to reduce the intensity and the levels of training a few days before the event. And then around about the day before, the night before, you eat a massively high carbohydrate diet day before, the night before the event, and really fuel up with the carbohydrates. And because your body is thinking that it's not getting any carbohydrates, as soon as those carbohydrates land, your body will store them ready for exercise, or ready in case you're going to go for another low carbohydrate diet. And what that does is it maximizes that glycogen stores. The stores of carbohydrate is called glycogen in your muscles. You're maximizing those stores, and it gives you that little bit more energy, increases your energy stores ready to do the event. And if we remember going back to the application, therefore we can run for longer, we can maintain our pace for a longer period of time, which will essentially help us run quicker, cycle quicker, swim quicker and further, and therefore win the event. Final area we're going to talk about is hydration and hydration strategies. So let's break it down into 2 parts. The first part is, well, why do we need water? This light blue box is here. Well, clearly we need water to prevent dehydration. That's a given, but it's a given mark. The impact it has, dehydration will have, will make us more dizzy. It'll lead us to lack of concentration. It'll lead to poor concentration levels, and it can affect our blood pressures. So these are the reasons why we want to avoid dehydration, or what we want to do is take in water to prevent these things happening. So the strategies, and often it will ask about a hydration strategy for an endurance athlete, or someone who's going to be needing water over a sustained period of time. So not a short event, a longer event, like maybe it could be a Tour de France, which could be multiple days of events, or it could be something as simple as a marathon. So they will probably give you the scenario in the exam question. But the first step we would do is to pre-hydrate. So 1 to 2 hours before the event, you're going to hydrate properly. So make sure you take in enough liquids to get you through the beginning of the race. And once you've talked about the pre-hydration, talk about the post-hydration. So after the event, we've got another 1 to 2 hours of replenishment of our water. So we've got pre-hydration and post-hydration, just two simple ways of talking about when to take in the water. Then the next point is we talk about during the event. Okay, so during the event, you've got really two sort of options. You could either carry the water as an athlete, and you could use things like the water bottles that's stored on a bike. It could be a water pack, a camel pack on your backpack, or running with a water bottle. Or you can collect the water at fluid stations, which many athletes do. If you watched a marathon, there's loads of fluid stations where people can pick up water as they're running, and it's handed out by support teams. So you've got before, during, and after. And again, it's about 3 marks worth of questions there. So you could have the first 3 marks of why don't you want to get dehydrated, and then follow up with a strategy. So the strategy would be to pre-hydrate, take water on while you're actually doing the event, and how you would do that, and then following the event, what you're going to do to replenish that lost water. So that was a real quick whistle-stop tour of diet and nutrition strategies and types of answers you're going to need to put in your questions for the GCSE PE exam. So try to remember that, make some cue cards on what I've just talked about, and good luck.